I have been working on immigration probably for about 30 years. And what I would say is that for me, when I see what it is, it's actually more of the same policies, though it cannot be denied that in 2022, there was a significant uptick in migration that we saw and continue to see along the border. What is different, I think, from what I've seen in the past is that the countries of origin have changed somewhat, at least the proportions. We're seeing more migrants coming in from Venezuela, from Cuba, from Haiti, from Central America, but specifically from Nicaragua and Guatemala, which, here in Maryland are what we have always seen as what I consider our more traditional migrants are from El Salvador. The reasons for migration are many, but the policies, I think, in the US have hardly changed. And in fact, I'm going to talk a little bit about Title 42, very little, but just for a context. In March 2020, the Trump administration invoked a very old policy, Title 42, to combat the spread of COVID. For those who don't know, Title 42 is a public health provision that was enacted as part of the Public Health Service Act in 1944. So this is an old policy. It hadn't been enacted in many decades. In fact, in my lifetime, in my work in immigration over 30 years, I've never heard it enacted. The Trump administration invoked it to stop the spread of COVID-19 with the aim to seal America's borders from migrant and the virus, as if you could stop a virus crossing a border. It doesn't need a visa. But it also allowed for something, what I would call a very heavy stick, which is the expulsion of border crossers, including asylum seekers who are legitimately seeking safety. In April 2022, more recently, the Centers for Disease Control said there's no public health basis to continue expelling migrants and announced it would phase out Title 42. The policy was used in nearly 2.7 million instances as of March 2023. Why do I raise this? My blog this month is titled, Immigration is More Than the US-Mexico Border. The reality is all of this impacts every state, including Maryland. Now, I want to give you some statistics about Maryland and immigrants. According to the Vera Institute, the foreign-born population in Baltimore and Maryland represent an important and diverse share of our local communities, many who live in mixed status families. What is a mixed status family? I'm going to use mine as an example. My mom is US born. My dad was born in Mexico and became a US citizen. I was born in Mexico, but I had the privilege of being able to have dual citizenship. My husband, however, is a Mexican national. He has a legal permanent residence and he utilizes a green card to be able to work. What it means is there are, let me just share, there are about as many visas as there are letters in the alphabet. And with additional numbers, the H2A, H2B, H1B, you have U visas, you have W visas. There's all kinds of visas for all different kinds of statuses because people come to this country with a lot of different rationales. Some of them come with the intention of staying. Some of them come with the intention of working for a while, going back home. Some come here for a temporary period to escape war, conflict, etc. The Vera Institute estimates there's approximately 921,900 immigrants who reside in the state of Maryland. That's about 16% of the total population. These are from all countries from all over the world. Of these, there's about 363,000 children in Maryland with at least one immigrant parent. The vast majority of children with at least one immigrant parent are US citizens, about 86%, a little bit over actually. So what does that mean? Impacts on schools, English language learning, those kinds of things. How do you communicate with the parents if you're a teacher, et cetera? Those are very real things that are happening on a day-to-day basis. According to the 2020 American Community Survey, 20.4% of the population in Maryland speak a language other than English at home. That's incredible. Of those who are immigrants living in Maryland, 55.5% are now US citizens and 44.5% are foreign nationals. So there is much to discuss, but I know you're not here to listen to me. Please let us welcome Mexican Consul García Landa. Welcome, Consul. How are you today? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your incredible career. I was going over your bio. I'm just like awed.
Oh, thank you, Gabriela. You're very kind. I'm so glad to be here and to meet everyone. I'm a career diplomat. I've been in the service for 13 years now, posted in Mexico City, New York, in Raleigh, North Carolina, and now here in Washington, D.C. I'm the Deputy Consul of Mexico. We cover from DC, we cover obviously Maryland, but also DC itself, Virginia and West Virginia. And I've in my postings, I've done very diverse set of issues I've covered, including multilateral affairs at the UN and bilateral affairs for Latin America and Mexico. I did some development work as well for Central America. And in Raleigh and here, consular issues, which I think we will be talking about today. And I'm so glad to meet everyone. And I have put my email there for anyone if you want to follow up after with anything that we talk about or any other need that the community has.
Thank you. You only shared a little bit about what you did. His bio really is impressive. So let's talk a little bit about Mexico's consular services, which are really amazingly sophisticated. I shouldn't say amazingly, they're just incredibly sophisticated. For Mexican citizens living in the US, they're really quite a resource, but I think for all of us, because it brings a lot of knowledge, information, and history and understanding to the table. So I think you guys have about 50 consulates across the country, maybe a little bit more.
52.
52, okay.
We just opened up, Oklahoma was actually opened yesterday.
Oh my gosh, congratulations.
And we have a new one in New Brunswick, New Jersey, opening up soon. My predecessor in this deputy consul job is now the consul in New Jersey.
Wow. So, and that's what I meant by it's very sophisticated. They really are located in areas with high concentrations of Mexican nationals. And I've had the pleasure of working with the Mexican consulates for a very long time. I don't want to tell you how old I am, but I've watched it change and grow, and every year it becomes more and more important, I think, to the work I do in the space of immigrants and working with migrant communities. Tell us a little bit about the Mexican consular services and attending Mexican citizens in the US. Generally, obviously, because you just, as you said, 52 consulates, and maybe more specifically, some of the programs that you're focused on in the DMV region, but specifically here in Maryland.
Sure. Thank you very much. Yes, I think the Mexican consular work and the network that we have, especially in the US, but also in Canada and in other places around the world, is quite something. It's a lot of resources are devoted to it, human resources, financial resources, and a lot of thinking in Mexico, in the ministry and in the government as a whole, on how to better provide services and protect the rights of Mexican citizens in abroad. And the main objective is to protect, as I said, protect rights, and also to provide with the more traditional consular services to promote their well-being and also their integration into their host countries, regardless of their immigrant status, right? So that's an important principle for us, of course, that we don't. It's not even asked unless it's important for a service that they want to get, right? Because we provide, for example, legal services on the immigration side as well. So I think the first broad category of services is documentation, right? So the Mexican consulates will be the places where Mexican nationals will be able to come to get passports, to get consular identification that has their US address, and that is useful for opening bank accounts, etc. But also, for example, civil registry. Any Mexican national that is born abroad has the right to be a Mexican citizen. But to do that, they have to, the parents, or even them, if the parents are not available, even older people, have to come to get registered. So that's a very important service that we also provide. With civil registry, you also get death registry, of course. If there's someone that dies in the US, they can register their death here, and that's something that's needed as well to be able to transfer the remains to Mexico to get buried, right? And we have cases of those often, of course, because people live here. So many Mexicans live here in the United States. We provide legal assistance as well. So we have a network of lawyers, both contract lawyers and also consultant lawyers, through a series of programs. And so we help people when there's issues regarding to immigration, but also labor rights or family law, or if there's some other issue that they need to consult. We also have some criminal attorneys and help when there's a process in which the Mexican national could potentially be subject to death penalty. As a principle, Mexico also provides services to them to make sure that they have defense. Protection of rights is really important. I mean, legal, so labor rights, right? Many times we have Mexican nationals that are workers here, that their wages are unpaid, or there's unsafe conditions, or there's some other kind of dispute with their employer, and employers sometimes use the fact that they may not have documents, may not have an immigration status that is regular in the US. Mm-hmm. And that is not acceptable, right? Because workers have the same rights regardless of their status. That's right. So we provide protection and assistance with that as well. And then we have the community outreach aspect, which includes having conversations with leaders such as you. But we have health, a very important health component. We have a ventanilla de salud, which is a health window here in the consulate and in many of our services outside of the building. With a clinic that will take advantage of the fact that people are, for example, waiting for their documents, and also give them health consultation, give them health information, allow them to know what we have a list of clinics that they will be able to go to for free, or through their insurance, or other services, etc. In education, we have a number of programs that include scholarships, and the fact that if a child goes to Mexico, they can continue their studies in Mexico, and there's a streamlined process for them to be accepted at school, and for that for them not to be held back. We have a financial literacy component as well, and some financial services. For example, the newest one that we have is there's a new debit card that they can open in Mexico, I read about that. The US, in Mexico and the US with it's very simple, at a distance. So now they'll be able to send the remittances through the same financial institution, avoiding very high fees, etc. Mm-hmm. And specifically in Maryland, I would say that we provide everything, but we also have our consulate on wheels. So there's a consulate on wheels that is working every week, and it travels around basically Maryland and Virginia, mm-hmm. providing all of these services that I just mentioned, but closer to people, right? So that they don't have to get on the road. And we work through partners, through agencies, through people that we trust to get the consulate there. So we will go to Baltimore, for example, or to Annapolis, or to other places.
That's amazing. That's a lot of services. It's incredible. I had the privilege of working at the Department of Labor with the Obama administration, and I helped put together. We created a multilateral agreement with Mexico and the Central American countries, and I think the Dominican Republic and Colombia as well, to facilitate work between the Mexican government, all these other governments, and the Department of Labor to ensure the protection of workers, but easy access for the symbiotic relationship that you guys have. So I love to hear this. It's in my heart. So let's get serious. The focus in the media lately has often been on the U.S.-Mexico border, which is described as a crisis. As I mentioned, the Title 42 policy was canceled. And I know very well, and I'm going to say this to all of us, we are not here to make political commentary. It is not the role of the Mexican Consular Services to make political commentary about U.S. policy. However, for the purposes of context, we also recognize that this has got to have an impact on you. It definitely, I feel, has had an impact on us. Plus, in the case of Maryland, Governor Abbott in Texas has been sending buses to DC, and he's apparently sent around 9,000 folks from the border region to Washington, DC, but about 2,000 of those 9,000 have remained in Maryland. So we're always trying to figure out, how do we help everybody? How do we facilitate? Do they need to continue? Do they need healthcare, et cetera? Tell us a little bit more about whether this has changed your job, I guess, here, and if you've seen any differences here in Maryland, how it's impacted, and when these kinds of policies happen, does it change not so much the role of the consular services, but maybe your current goals, right? To be able to facilitate processes a little bit. Maybe we could learn from some of the lessons you've learned.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, so I think that the fact that we have 52 consulates now, and just in the last year, two more opened, it just shows that the consular network has to grow and it has to adapt all the time, right? Mm-hmm. So when changes happen in U.S. policies, as this is, and including like the specific things that you mentioned, in which immigrants or migrants are bused somewhere outside of the networks that perhaps are set up in closer to the border, and of course without the family networks and so on. It's an issue that we have to monitor very closely and to be very careful to see where the needs are. I would say that also the migration that is happening, and just it's not necessarily predominantly Mexican, right?
Right.
The spikes that happen because of what happened in Central America and in the Caribbean, etc., that are more impacted in the border are less heavy on the Mexican population. But we are working very hard in any case in the whole network to be able to respond. And for example, so their consular assistance is being reinforced, and there's a call center that is called the Center for Information and Assistance of Mexicans, CIAM, Centro de Información y Asistencia Mexicanos. It's a call center that anyone can call to ask about migratory issues, to ask about policies, to ask about the need for the Mexican the Mexican services that we give, and it's 24 hours a day, 7 hours a week, and that has been boosted to be able to respond to all of this. And we're just what you were observing, and we're seeing what needs may arise. But I think then the image of the crisis and so on also, I think also in the media has been tamped down a little bit because there's certain processes, and I believe that the US has also invested and given certain statements that perhaps allowed it for not to be the huge spike that was expected. But it's still an issue, and it will continue to be so. And when policies change, Mexico is doing everything possible to also change with that.
Sure. And sometimes, I don't know, I find it a little disruptive because timing and sequencing is a lot in what we do, and we're preparing for one thing and then there's a shift, and it's like, okay, adjustments. So let's talk a little bit about Mexican nationals here in Maryland. I was very excited to learn that there's a place called Little Mexico outside of Hyattsville, and that there's some really amazing restaurants I've been sampling periodically. I always include food when I talk about immigration. It's important. Let's talk, how many Mexican nationals are currently estimated to be living in Maryland, and what do they look like? Like, who are we, age-wise, male versus female, all of those things. And I'm also interested in what areas from Mexico they arrive from. I'm seeing states I don't see in this side of the world so much. Maybe you see them more in Chicago or in, like Sinaloa. I recently ran into a whole group from there. I was just wondering, what should we know about this very vibrant, hardworking community?
Absolutely. Yes, it's really fascinating how there's clusters of different, even small towns, right? And you have a small a whole neighborhood that is from a specific town in Michoacán, and they're able to even rename streets and so on. That's a wonderful part of immigration, I think. So yeah, to provide some context, the population of Maryland is a little over 6.1 million, right? And the population of Mexican origin is estimated in around 116,000. So almost 2% of the total population of the state. The counties that we have identified as with the largest number of Mexicans is Prince George, Anne Arundel, and Montgomery County. What we have seen is that the Mexican population living in Maryland comes from mainly from central and southern Mexico. So Puebla, which is east of Mexico City, Veracruz in the Gulf, Oaxaca, south of Puebla and Veracruz, and Mexico City. And I think I would say a couple of things about the Mexican population that comes. One is that there's a big element of seasonal workers, those with H-2B visas, many in the seafood industry, right? The crab industry in Maryland, also in hospitality and many other parts of the economy, construction, of course. And it's a very diverse community, but the fact that they come from these places that I tell you in central Mexico also means that many are predominantly indigenous language speaking. So Spanish will be their second language and English will be their third language. And there's a very broad array of how much Spanish they speak. And we are also working on that. We can give services in 5 indigenous languages.
Oh, wow.
Through the Consulate, and the same call center that I mentioned will now have 24-hour standby translators in case we need someone to translate for either their passports, or if they have someone is deceased and they need the services. So that's also an investment that we have made, and we value very much those kinds of cultural that cultural heritage that is for every Mexican, not just for the ones that speak it and live it.
I think I'm trying to pull my anthropology classes out. I believe we have over 70 indigenous languages in Mexico, something like that, many of whom which are being lost, obviously. But I commend the embassy and the consulate for doing this. I think it's so important to keep those traditions alive, and language and culture go hand in hand in so many different ways. I talk a lot, and I'd love to dig in more on the areas they come from, because it's very different from what you normally hear. The ones from Oaxaca must be the ones that speak the indigenous languages, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, Oaxaca, Puebla, Veracruz. Yes. So
las tres. Okay.
Right. So the languages that we have the service now are Nahuatl, which is spoken in Puebla, in Veracruz, in San Luis Potosí, Otomí in the Estado de Mexico, around Mexico City, Hidalgo and Querétaro, Zapoteco, Oaxaca, Guerrero and Puebla, and Mixteco, Oaxaca and Veracruz.
Wow.
Mainly. And these are only 4. I said 5, but it's because there's 2 varieties of Mixteco, I believe, that we will be able to provide both.
That's incredible. And they're not easy to learn. I tried to learn Nahuatl and it was a disaster. Um, so one of the impacts of emerging communities is that the receiving areas aren't always prepared, right? It's, especially for limited English proficient in this case, or indigenous speakers or Spanish speakers. It impacts housing, it impacts education, it impacts healthcare, even our food, agriculture, et cetera. Can you share with us some of what Mexico's consular services do for communities in those cases? Because you're serving your community, but there are services you mentioned like the ventanilla, the salud, the health window. I imagine during COVID that you must have developed relationships with local health departments or clinics, et cetera. What are lessons learned that we could share with the audience, most of whom are nonprofit leaders, because I think it would help us as well.
Absolutely. So I think the main thing is that the Consular Network and the Consulate here is a partner, right? We're a trusted partner for Mexican nationals that know the services that we deliver. In more and more, I think they also are they like the things that we do, right? Because we've become more efficient, more modern. There's an improvement more and more, and trying to bring services closer. And so with COVID, we did do a lot of partnership with health departments around the country. And for example, the consular, we were COVID test sites and vaccination spots for the whole COVID crisis, right? Especially in the most difficult moments. And this was not only for the Hispanic and not only for the Mexican, but the Hispanic Latino community, and also broader than that. So anyone could come to get their vaccine and so on. And the results were quite good, right? Because we started with a lot of reticency, with a lot of issues with access as well. And in the end, by the end of the crisis, according to the information that I have, is that the Hispanic population had higher rates of vaccination than the white population in many places of the country, right? Mm-hmm. So that was quite a good benchmark, because it was a collaborative thing. So we produce, for example, bilingual materials, right, together with the health department. So we will be able to check, and many times a health department, perhaps in Maryland or in another state, will produce something in Spanish, but it's not necessarily Latin American Spanish sometimes, right? Or it's not Mexican Spanish. So we can help with some of the nuances sometimes. Here in Maryland, we're in partnership with the Center for Applied Linguistics. We're working on a website of resources for focus on Spanish and English learning, because we think it's very important and very valuable for children and later adults to be able to keep their knowledge of Spanish, because the marketplace will also value it in the future. Mm-hmm. And we have an educational guidance window with information focused on the DMV. I can provide all of these websites for you to also look at. And when there's someone that has a specific issue, for example, I mentioned, if there's a family that's going to go back home, back to Mexico, then we provide a specialized guidance on how to transition from one school system to the other, etc. So that's the kind of work that we do. And I think nonprofit providers, even in the churches or schools or different associations are extremely important, because everything is a collaborative effort for language access, for us to be able to refer people, or for the agencies to refer people to us, right? Many times Mexicans don't know that they have certain benefits if they come. If they have a death in the family, we help with a small part, but a significant part of the cost that a Mexican family will have to be able to pay for the funeral services, and then to transfer the remains to Mexico. We also help with people that are, if they're really struggling economically, like they've, you know, in I would guess you would say indigent situation, then there's also some resources that are available. If there's violence in the home, we will provide them with the legal help, but also some financial help, ideally. So yes, that I would focus on the fact that it's there's so much collaboration going on, and that's what makes the biggest impact for specific people as well, and for the community.
Mhm. That is great. We have a question in the chat. Is there a place where all of these resources are disseminated and pushed out to our community, like a Facebook page?
Yes, so yes, social media. We have a Facebook page. We have, of course, we have Twitter, and we have our website. But I think the best place for people to know, to learn what's happening when we're going to a certain community, when appointments are available, what we're doing is our Facebook page, and I also make sure to give it to you as well.
Another question, well, not a kind of a comment and a question. Educational services are so needed at many tiers. I would like to know if there are developments for supporting professionals who come from their country. I think of our medical and health crisis across the nation. Some of our immigrants are well-educated, certified doctors, pharmacists, engineers, and so much more. However, I see more and more of these professionals losing their careers due to immigration. I would love to see a program that could address this. Are there any conversations in your office of or beyond on these issues for these professionals who could potentially serve both countries as well?
Thank you, Almarie.
Almarie.
So I think that what I would share regarding the Mexican population and the services that we provide is that the diversity that we mentioned before also has to do with education. So we have many very highly educated, highly qualified, experienced, and successful people in the Mexican diaspora. And the way that we work with them is the Institute for Mexicans Abroad, IME, Instituto de los Mexicanos en el Exterior, that is part of the Foreign Service and works through the Consular Network. They have a network of it's called Red de Talentos, was the original name. It's gone through several iterations, but it's in networks that exist, and there's one here in DC that covers the DMV area, that are people that are in banking or in law firms or in the medical community, the medical practice, etc. And they have, it's not a social thing, right? There's a social component, but they have a lot of resources to help out people that are that are studying or have graduated or are professionals, to be able to also boost their careers and their prospects. So I would say that we have if there's a specific Mexican national that is suffering what you're mentioning, they can come to us and we can connect them with people that will be interested in helping Mexican nationals here.
One of the things we've been discussing at the local level from a policy perspective is there a way to help get them certified, right? This might be something that the Consulate and MLU could talk about together. Is there a way within the Maryland legislative process to make some changes, advocate with the agencies on things that already exist that could be tweaked, and then get the message out to our folks that if you go through this process, you can keep your education, have, much like what you do with the children and they go back to Mexico and you got to transfer all that information with the adults. To make sure that their certification that they gained in their country of origin is matched with what the certification processes demand for here. I think it could be potentially a win-win. I understand and recognize it's very complicated depending on the issue area, but there's a lot of different ways to help advance all of us, right? We complain we don't have enough doctors or nurses or, just to look at the medical field. But this can apply in a lot of different places, engineering, architecture, et cetera. So it's, I hate to see a brilliant brain trust be lost just because it's a certification issue. Sometimes it's language as well. So I want to talk a little bit more about your consulados móviles because I'm always fascinated with them. I feel like you guys were probably the first to do something like that in the country. I love the idea that you bring services to where people are versus trying to force them to move around and get to where the services are. I think that's very innovative and has proved successful. Do you do any work, for example, in some of our, Maryland is a small state, but like the Eastern Shore, et cetera. You mentioned the H-2Bs and the seasonal workers in the fisheries. Tell us a little bit more about how let's say we want to host an event and we'd like the Mexican consular mobile, como es consulado móvil, come to visit with us. What would we have to do?
Right. Yes. No. So yes. The Consulate on Wheels is the most effective link that we have between the consular section and the Mexican population living further afield. Right. So through the work we direct people that live in Maryland and Virginia, and I think we haven't done one in West Virginia for a while, but the needs there are different. But we will provide everything. So our team will go to a place. It will set up camp in a church or in an auditorium in a school, and we will give the documentation services, passports, consular ID, civil registry, etc. And we will give and everything, all of the ancillary things that I mentioned that include the health window and the legal support. So all of the resources will go with the team to set up there. And we usually do it with trusted partners that we have worked in the past, but we're also always looking for needs. So if there's a need for these documentation services that is identified by any organization, those present here or anyone else, and there's also the way to get support to bring it, then we can schedule it for late this year or later or early next year, right? And so the needs that our partner usually provide are quite simple, right? It's a space. We need an internet connection, and it has to be a space where there's bathrooms and so on. But we will visit you and look at the we will check the technical aspects, right? We have some requirements, but that's it, right? And it works quite well. And I'm trying to pull up the list that we have. So we're scheduled to be in, right now the consulate is in where are we today? We're in Petersburg, Virginia, next week Richmond, then there's Harrisonburg, Virginia, Manassas, but we're in Clinton, Maryland from the 27th to the 30th of June, and then in Annapolis from the 11th to the 15th of July. Only, right? Only we'll be there a couple of times this year, starting with July. Then Annapolis again a little later in the year, and Glen Burnie.
Wow.
And others, and this is a year-long effort.
So that's incredible. I was just remembering as I was listening to you, one of the things that the Consulate on Wheels also does, if I'm not mistaken, is when there's a climate crisis, or a climate event, let's say a tornado or a hurricane in an area with high percentages of Latinos. I know that the Consulate also goes. How do you address emergency services?
Yeah, so we work through basically through our social media, but also through our work in person here in the headquarters and in the consulates on prevention. So there's a number of things that we do to explain to people, hey, there's a hurricane coming, or there's some issue, and try to have your documents in place. And there's some, like, we provide some like plastic bags that explain exactly what they have. So that's the prevention part. And then to respond, yes, if there's many times when the consulate will basically move to a location to be available to interview people, to help out with some resources, right? With some money help that can be really important in specific instances. And we coordinate with the governments and partners to be able to know what's needed in the moment. But yes, those operations, I mean, it has happened in Louisiana, you know, with Katrina, for example. The consulate closed, and then I think the Houston consulate basically moved nearby to be able to work with people. Money can also be for Mexican nationals that want to go back to Mexico. There's money for us to buy a bus ticket, and then they can repatriate themselves. And that is sometimes what they prefer to do when there's an emergency, right? If they lost a lot.
So I want to ask you, you mentioned earlier about having a lot of protection services around work exploitation, et cetera. And I'm always concerned about the exploitation of anybody, but particularly of immigrants. And, you know, we as an organization are very eager to reduce it through methods like civic engagement and disseminating information about services and what their rights are, right? I know that the consular services see a lot of this firsthand, and what is going on. You mentioned about wages being stolen, those kinds of things. Could you talk a little bit more about that and just give us some advice about how we could connect with you, one, but also things we should think about as we engage on these issues?
Of course. I would go back to the fact that we need to, that there's so many partnerships that the consulate has. With one partnership or one set of partnerships is with the government, right? So the Wage and Hour Division, Department of Labor, with the Attorney General's offices in the States, all of them they have their own programs because they're also trying to prevent for the broader population, right? So sometimes we can help with the language aspect. Sometimes we can help with the outreach, right? We have many people from the Wage and Hour Division. They will come weekly here to give us a small chat to the people that are congregated here, and that has a multiplication effect, right? Because they'll go back to their work. They'll think about it. They'll say, hey, maybe those times that they decided not to pay for my overtime because whatever, because I had a fight with the boss's boss's brother or whatever, that wasn't okay, and then they come back and there's consultation there. So that's the thing, and we give them access to legal support and guidance. And our network of lawyers, we have a network of lawyers that will give the first consultation for free. And then if they decide to take it through, there's a process in which that can be covered by the consulate, right? If it's an issue in which there's like clear exploitation, everything that has to do with human rights, right? The worst thing that, of course, we need to prevent is hate crimes. There have been some in the area, and we take that very seriously. So we engage at a very high level with the police department or the sheriff's department, the attorney general, the state government, or the federal government. Our embassy is obviously here as well, and the attorneys help a lot with that, with assessing the cases, to looking at the law and how we best respond.
Excellent. So there's one other question in the group. Actually, I think we're asking you to inspire us. Thinking that Latinos are a young group, lots of students seeking work, diplomatic careers may seem inaccessible, especially to Latino youth here in the US. Any recommendations to inspire them to pursue their career tracks, internships, career fairs? I would add scholarships.
Right. No, and I would say that the diplomatic career in this case, well, if it's a Mexican, they would probably have to move to Mexico to become a Mexican diplomat. But if they're staying here and they want to, they're interested in government work and in something like diplomacy, I would just say that there's experiences around. I have, of course, developed many friends that are in the U.S. diplomatic service, and it's a very diverse group. It's a very diverse group also in upbringing and in the opportunities that they had. But you need to find the mentor, to find someone that will guide you through that. We do have interns, for example, here in the consulate. If there's people that are interested in working with Mexican nationals, we will be able to give them a very good summer experience, because they will do a little bit of clerical work, they will do a lot of people work, and then they will know the broader sense of what we do. That is something that I think is interesting, and I'm sure other consulates of other Latin American countries will also be available, right? Either if that's where they are from, right? Their families are Salvadoran, the Salvadoran consulate will perhaps be able to provide. But in our case, for Mexicans, that would be really interesting. We're very interested in the DACA kids. Well, some of them are not kids anymore, right? Because it's
Yeah, they're adults in 20 years.
Yeah, but they are a specific population that we're very interested in seeing be successful, because they're the beneficiaries, but at the same time the victims, right? Because now they're in this forever in this situation, unless they transition through marriage or some other thing, some other process. But we would love to have more of them in the consulate to share where they are, and for us to be able to also respond to what their needs more.
That's amazing. Thank you. We're going to flood you now with DACA kids. So we have a request. Please come to the Eastern Shore with the Consulado Móvil.
Thank you.
Which I think is great. I'm going to hand it over now to Veronica. Oh, there's one more question. Aging adults, especially parents of first-generation Americans, are extremely vulnerable, often cannot access healthcare services, and do not have retirement plans. Younger generations often become the sole caregivers and offering financial support. This adds to the complexity of young Mexican Americans getting ahead and making investments in their future. Are there any programs to support aging adults?
That's a great question that I don't know that much about. But what I would say is that, yes, this is an important thing, and we do in all of our services, adults over 65 will get a 0.5% discount, right? So that helps their the family economy a bit. So we do try to advance in that, but I think you or perhaps others in the group will know more about what other agencies or partners have specifically for aging adults. I haven't heard of anything that the Consular Network has, but it's an important matter, of course.
Thank you, Consul. I'm going to hand it now over to our chair, Veronica Cole, to give us her wrap up and encourage us to do what we do best.
To be awesome. Gracias, Gabriela. Dr. Lemus, this was awesome as usual. I am always impressed by the caliber of talent that you bring to Maryland Latinos Unidos. And Felipe, thank you so much for giving us time. I know you're super busy. And I'm going to commend you. The Mexican consulate is everywhere. I know we're incredibly nationalistic, if that's even a word, but very patriotic, siempre jalando para el dominicano, para el salvadoreño, para el guatemalteco. Pero the Mexican consulate shows up for every Latino thing. During COVID, you're absolutely right. You hosted many vaccine testing things. There's never been an exclusive event where you said, no, this is only for the Mexicans. You've hosted many activities where you've provided scholarships for all, so resources for all. So a big a shout out of gratitude, porque siempre vienen ustedes como mexicanos que abren puertas para todos. So you've always led the charge, being incredibly inclusive in the community. And you've always been at the table when we've discussed ways to collaborate. So thank you so much. I would like to encourage everyone to keep the conversation going. And I think we can push other consulates to maybe mimic or take a page off the Mexican consulate, because they can't afford to cover all of our countries. So if we're hearing that the El Consulado Móvil is so effective, you know, they can't just be the only ones to go to the Eastern Shore. They would deplete all their resources. So I know that Anne Arundel County under Sergio Polanco does a beautiful job of bringing a lot of the consulates together. And then they host, you know, the Guatemaltecos, Salvadoreños, los Mexicanos, and everybody gets their visas and their passports, which is beautiful. So I think we got to get a lot better at working together. We're still close to DC. We can leverage that. So I think it's a huge opportunity to continue to collaborate. And our people are still very connected to our home countries. We all want our cédulas. We all need our passports. And sadly, you know, it's the life cycle, right? Nacimos, nos morimos, nos casamos, nos divorciamos, los niños. So we all need to worry about our legal paperwork, and invariably we all don't even know where we go. So having these connections is super, super important. So, Consul, le agradezco el tiempo. And Gabriela, thank you for connecting the dots. We got to keep working together, because there's a lot of our people, Consul, that can't go back home, and they're in dire straits. No tienen la educación, no tienen los recursos, and they're stuck. So we are that bridge. So anything we can do together, programmatically, whether it's education, economic development, resources, we need to work a lot smarter. So those programs you have, we can push out. So Gabriela, let's make sure we're including his programs in our newsletters and our social media, so that our people are helping each other. We don't need to invent the wheel cuando ya lo tienen ellos allá. And that we just have to open some doors. So it's been a pleasure. Pero señores, let's keep in touch como siempre, so that we can keep growing and getting better and supporting one another.
Thank you very much. Yes, I would love that. Please reach out to any individual person that wants to know more, or has a question, or has a resource that they want promoted. We're a convening space for you as well. Right. And a connection with the Mexican population and other Latino and Hispanic.
Yeah, you guys have been always so classy. El cónsul Rafael Laveaga es fenomenal. Buenísimo el señor.
Sí.
Thank you so much. We do have one person with their hand raised, Saibel Cardenas. You want to very briefly, we have one now we're done with the minute, but go ahead.
Yeah, I understand that we are running, we ran out of time. Well, I work for the program, the Migrant Case Management program here at the Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Washington, and I happen to be from Venezuela. So while I was listening to you, I was like, oh my God, I wish that Venezuela had that government, the one, you know, like the one you have, or not the institution, you know, that you have, regardless of any government you have. So we have the migrants, we have the diaspora here, but we don't have a consulate. So please, if you have any, you know, initiative, anything like Veronica could said, I mean, our migrants could really benefit from that, because they don't have nothing. And many of them are qualified. Many of them can contribute to this country greatly. But that's what we have. Like, that's all I wanted to know, just to, you know, plant the seed there.
Thank you. Yes, and there's specific things that we can share with any other Latin American community, and that you need, we will do that, of course.
So, Consul, muchísimas gracias. We have come to our final moment here. Folks are thanking us and saying, great presentation, good job. We appreciate you and all the work that the Mexican Consular Services are doing. And maybe we pick up with some of what Saibel has suggested. Maybe we host a roundtable and bring some of our friends and partners together with you and have a frank conversation about how we can do things better in connecting the dots between the services that are available from all of us to be able to respond to these issues because like I said, the Mexican consular services are pretty sophisticated and they do spend a lot of resources and they are gracious and they welcome all of us. It's really incredible. So gracias, Consul. Bottom of my heart. I look forward to working with you in the future and thank you all for being. We appreciate you so much. You're always loyal participants and you always have great questions. Have a great day. And a good week.